In the vast expanse of the Kepler Dominion, where civilizations span galaxies and military academies train the finest warriors in known space, there existed a question that had never been asked. Not because no one dared to ask it, but because no one had ever thought it mattered. The question was simple, devastating in its simplicity. What is the kill ratio for one Earth Marine? For 300 years, Earth had remained on the periphery of galactic affairs. Quarantined, some said, protected, others whispered, but never taken seriously. The Kepler Dominion had moved on, building empires with species whose names alone could bend light, whose weapons defied physics, whose armor could withstand the fury of neutron stars compressed into artillery fire. Humans were interesting, a curiosity, like a painting in a museum that you might glance at once before moving on. But in the halls of the Kepler War Academy, on the crystalline moon of Theta Praxis, something unusual was happening. A symposium, a gathering of the brightest military minds in the known galaxy, convening for the first time in a century. And they had invited an observer from Earth. His name was Captain James Chen, and he was about to change everything. The Academy stood as a monument to martial excellence. Its halls glittered with the achievements of 10,000 commanders, Vorn Kreth generals whose tactical genius had conquered star systems, Xifax admirals who had orchestrated the gravitational siege of the Andromeda cluster, Terethian war priests whose psychic coordination could command fleets across parsecs without delay. And then there was Captain James Chen, walking through those halls in a simple dress uniform, watching with curious, measuring eyes. The symposium's first session addressed a fundamental question in modern warfare: efficiency metrics, kill-to-casualty ratios, resource expenditure versus target elimination. The slides flickered with data points that made the Academy's finest strategists nod knowingly. A Vorn Kreth general presented first, his 4 eyes scanning the amphitheater as he explained his latest campaign. We achieved a ratio of 847 enemy combatants eliminated for every 3 of our own lost, he announced with pride. A remarkable efficiency in the southern expansion. The audience murmured approval. This was excellence. A Xifax admiral followed, detailing a siege that lasted 17 years. Our ratio reached 4,200 to 1, though the investment in patience was substantial. Time, after all, is our greatest resource. More applause. The academics were impressed. Then the moderator turned to the human observer seated in the back row. Captain Chen, Earth has been remarkably quiet in galactic conflicts. Tell us, in your professional opinion, what would you estimate as an acceptable kill ratio for a single human soldier in direct combat? Chen smiled. It was not an arrogant smile. It was sad, knowing, and infinitely weary. May I answer a question with a question? He asked, rising slowly. The moderator gestured permission. I want to tell you about a place called the Kuiper Ridge. Chen began, his voice steady as ice water. Not a place you'd find on any star chart. Not because it's hidden, but because 700 of my people died there, and the galaxy barely noticed. He walked toward the center of the amphitheater. The lights seemed to focus on him now, though they hadn't moved. The Kuiper Ridge is where the Xarath Collective decided to test a new bioweapon. Something elegant, efficient, something that would revolutionize their conquest of the Outer Rim. They deployed it against our civilian colony. 300,000 people lived there. Families, children, scientists studying alien ecosystems. The amphitheater was silent. The bioweapon worked precisely as designed. 97% of the population was gone in 8 hours. 97%. But the Xarath didn't account for one thing. He paused. They didn't account for what humans do when they have nothing left to lose. A visual screen flickered to life behind him. Not a recording. A photograph. A single soldier, standing in the ash and ruin of a colony, rifle in hand. 700 of us remained, scattered across the colony. The Xarath sent a full invasion force to consolidate their victory. 20,000 soldiers, advanced armor, orbital support, all of it deployed against 700 survivors who had nothing but a choice. He turned to face the Academy's greatest military minds directly. Do you want to know the kill ratio we achieved? The silence in that amphitheater was absolute. Chen's voice dropped even lower. 20,000 to 1. 14,000 of the Xarath invasion force eliminated before they managed to overwhelm us. By soldiers who had no armor, no air support, no hope, fighting in the ruins of their own homes, surrounded by ash and grief. He let that sit in the room for a moment. That's not efficiency, he continued. And now his voice carried something that was neither pride nor bitterness, but something deeper, something honest. That's desperation. That's what happens when you corner people who have loved ones and homes and futures they're trying to protect. That's what you get when you fight someone who has something to fight for. The Vorn Kreth general stood up slowly. That's madness.
Suicide combat tactique.
You traded your lives at a rate of 1 to 1.5. That's a catastrophic ratio. Chun turned to him. You're right, he said. From your perspective, it was catastrophic. Because you're measuring a war as accountants measure profit. But tell me, General, how many of your soldiers fought knowing they were already dead? How many of yours continued fighting after all their officers fell? How many of yours carried wounded comrades on their backs through chemical fire while composing messages to their families? The general had no answer. Our last transmission came from a 17-year-old Marine named Sarah Okonkwo, Chan said, his voice softening into something almost reverent. She had her back to a collapsed wall, 3 attackers closing in, and she was singing, not screaming, not begging, singing, a song her mother taught her. He looked out across the amphitheater. That's not a military statistic. That's not an efficiency metric. But that's who we are. And maybe that's why the Xarath never expanded beyond the Kuiper Ridge. They took their full objective, achieved their strategic goals, and then spent the next 5 years trying to understand how 700 colonists had enough will to haunt them forever. The Kepler War Academy never published the data from that day, but the stories spread, whispered from shuttle to shuttle, shared in the quiet moments between briefings. A human's kill ratio isn't measured in mathematics. It's measured in meaning, in the way a soldier stands when they're surrounded, in the choice to keep fighting not because victory is possible, but because surrender is unthinkable, in the refusal to let darkness win, even when the darkness has already won. The academies revised their curricula, not because they wanted to copy human tactics, but because they realized they had been measuring the wrong things all along. They had been asking, what is the most efficient way to kill? When they should have been asking, what makes an enemy worth fighting? And in those crystalline halls, where the finest military minds in the galaxy had once gathered to discuss ratios and efficiency, something shifted. A recognition, an understanding that the universe contained a species that didn't fight to dominate, didn't fight to conquer, fought to protect, fought to matter, fought to ensure that the people they loved would remember them not as statistics, but as light in darkness. The next gathering of the Kepler War Academy was different. In the roster of attendees, Earth's name appeared no longer as a curiosity or an observer, but as a peer. Captain James Chen never returned to that academy. His work was done. But in the years that followed, a strange thing happened across the galaxy. When human soldiers were mentioned in military circles, they were not discussed as fighters. They were discussed as a reminder of what war actually cost, a reminder of what courage truly looked like. And for the first time, the galaxy understood something that had eluded the accountants of war for millennia, that the most powerful force in the universe was not armor or weapons or tactical supremacy. It was the willingness of one person to stand against impossible odds and refuse to break. It was being human. If the story moved you, if it reminded you of why the human spirit matters, then please subscribe for more stories from the stars. Stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Stories that remind us what we're truly capable of. Because somewhere in the darkness between worlds, those stories are still being told. And humanity is still rising.